It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, June 10th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's taking a cue from the Flyers and doing a deep dive on a few guys they talked to at the Combine.
Yeah, let's see what they say.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade, and I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. To keep up with all our episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we are continuing our coverage of the info you brought us back from the NHL Scouting Combine. And we're kind of focusing on three guys today that the Philadelphia Flyers definitely met with at the Combine, per your reporting. And it's kind of related to the late first round picks and the second round picks here, which is a good reminder of our weekly offseason poll this week. We asked you what you thought we should do with the 22nd overall and the Oilers pick, and there's several options for you out there. The link to that poll is in the show notes. It's also posted on our YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed and check it out. We are going to take a look at Ben Kindel, Cole McKinney, and Matthew Gard today. And we're going to start with Ben Kindel, who's the highest ranked of those three guys. Now, he is a smaller guy. Don't be scared, though, because I think there's a lot of good things to say when it comes to Ben here. He's 5'10", 180-ish pounds, although you can probably say if he looked bigger than that at the Combine.
He didn't.
Okay. So he just turned 18 in April. He's been playing with the Calgary Hitmen in the WHL. And as we know, the Flyers have a very strong history and connection to those Calgary Hitmen, a storied past there. And he is a very, very, very high scoring winger with a lot of pace to his game.
Yeah, he's a guy. The reason I didn't have him in my list, originally I didn't have enough views, and then I wasn't loving his views like for a first round pick. Now, if you took him with the last pick in the first round, it's a second round pick. It's fine. So it's essentially that. So I'd be okay with that. I think that pace is good. I don't know if he's going to keep up that pace at the NHL level because I think his skating needs work, and he knows his skating needs some work. So there's that. He does have a really high skill level, no question. Excellent passer, really good shot. Just to answer like some questions out there, he doesn't have like a Cole Caulfield kind of shot. It's not like that. So
I think, and that's kind of the question here, because, you mentioned that you had not had him ranked on your list, and why versus some other people. His high right now is 15, his low is 27, the median is 19, and that's all first round territory. And you don't have him there, and it seems like that lack of shot and the skating is a big reason why, other than the early on you hadn't actually seen him as much yet.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a really quick release. I just don't think it's like a devastating shot, but his release is terrific. I just also feel like he needs a lot of space out there. So like I see, a lot of his goals are when he's getting past defense or 2-on-1s and, give and goes. And those are all really good. And I don't see enough defense out of him. I see a forecheck, and that part's really good. He definitely is feisty that way. I don't know how much he can put on his frame. I looked at his frame. I saw people wondering about, hey, Cole Reshny. I think Reshny could put a little more on his frame, and Reshny can work in tighter spaces. And I think when you're that height, you either have to have that devastating shot like Caulfield, or be able to work in tight spaces. And I'm not saying he can't make it. He probably can, because he does a lot of other things, but he needs to improve his two-way game. Like, I think that's something where that could really help him. But just didn't grab me as much as everybody else. I think he's really good, and I enjoyed talking to him. And like I said, I would spend a late first on him. But, when you're doing these lists, there's so many guys you could put in those last couple of spots, and they all end up running into those first 3 or 4 picks
Right.
in the second round. I don't think he will. I think he will get picked. It's just if it were me.
In the late first round, you think he'll get
I
picked?
think in the late. And if it was me, I probably would just wait. But that's just me. That's just the way I feel.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair, and that's why, like, different prospect
Yeah.
scouts have different opinions, and that is your opinion, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think, when you look at his scoring, it does look tempting, right? Because
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
past season, he had 99 points in 65 games, 35 goals, 64 assists, and then he tacked on an additional 15 points in the playoffs in 11 games, and I think that screams Cole Caulfield type, right? Given his size and
Mhm.
that level of output in junior hockey. And I think that there's a lot of Flyers fans, myself included partially, who still have like these pangs of them skipping a guy like
Mhm.
Cole Caulfield, in favor of somebody that they thought had a higher floor in Cam York, right? And different position, of course, but like I think that they went with lower risk, higher floor in
They
there
did.
and in that pick. And that given Cole Caulfield's size, it was a huge risk. And I think like there's a little bit of hesitancy here to pass up a guy like this, given that level of output.
Yeah, I mean, he's terrific on the power play, and he's a more skilled passer than Cole Caulfield. And I just don't think his shot is as devastating as Cole Caulfield. But he's on a power play, he'd still be terrific. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you'd want him there. But I do wonder, like, with his two-way play, or has to improve that, where he would fall in a lineup. I mean, if you're taking him, with the Flyers' second first round pick, let's say he's there, I can't guarantee you he's a second liner.
Right. And I think, you mentioned Cole Reshney, and that's
Yeah.
kind of been or become our benchmark for that pick right now.
Yeah.
If you're going to go with a forward at 22, he's kind of our benchmark player.
He's
in
one
this
of them. I
year's-
have another guy in mind too,
Right.
but he is one of them. And Ravensburgen's one of them, right?
Right. But he's
You're
not a
talking about this
forward.
type. No, he's not a forward.
I'm saying if you're going with a forward, we've kind of established Reshney as our benchmark for that 22nd overall pick. And obviously, Ben here is a lot smaller, and the range of possibility of what he could be in the NHL is much wider. And so is thus higher risk. And I think that's
Yeah.
fair to say.
Yeah, I think it's higher risk. I spoke to Reshney too, and the interesting thing was I asked him flat out about him having to score maybe in the middle of the ice like he does in juniors, and he thinks he'll be able to. He kind of looked at Travis Konecny and said, there's a lot of me in there, and I do think he's right. I do think there is a lot of Travis Konecny in him. So that's kind of like the difference, I think.
Yeah, and so that's why I think it's reasonable, in your opinion, it seems, and mine as well, given the deficiencies in his game, that if you're going to pick a guy like him, I think you take the risk at the Oilers pick or
Yeah.
the first of your second round picks.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that you take the risk with the 22nd overall. I think there are teams that would.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
I think that in this case, I think in the example of Cole Caulfield, I think it was pretty obvious that the Flyers should have taken Cole Caulfield. It was a much more obvious decision then. I don't think passing up Ben Kindel is going to create that same feeling.
It won't because because with Caulfield, like the Flyers always say, or Flyers fans always say, they need a sniper. They need someone who could score goals.
Mhm.
He was that guy. He is that guy.
Right.
He's always
Right.
been that guy. Nobody's getting, Ben Kindel saying that he's the same level of sniper. He is a sniper, but I don't think he's the
Mhm.
same level of sniper.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And if is a team going to take a risk on him at a higher pick? Possibly.
Maybe.
But I don't. I would not feel upset if the Flyers passed on him, but I would not feel upset if they picked him at one of those lower picks either.
No, I mean,
So
you wouldn't. Yeah, it's not like I would say it's bad. I would just say, yeah, there's probably somebody else I'd like better.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair, but I do think there's a lot of skill there, and again, if they wind up holding on to a lot more of the second round picks, for whatever reason, then he's a guy you take and just add him to the pile of players and see what floats to the top from this year's draft, and I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. I think it's one of those things where I don't know. I don't think I think he's more of a big swing. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And another guy that we're going to talk about later in the show is Matthew Gard, who's a little bit further down the
Yeah.
list. But coming up next, we're going to talk about another forward, Cole McKinney, coming up next.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored job post puts your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. When you have a new project that requires just the right hire to pull it off, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person's a setback. And that's exactly when Indeed's sponsored job posts come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need.
All right. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk a little bit more about Cole McKinney, who we are about to profile right now, because we're going to have a little conversation about scouting in the NHL in general from a listener email question from David, who wanted to just know how scouting worked in the NHL on teams. And we're going to focus on amateur scouting related to the draft, obviously,
Right.
because that's where we are, but also kind of look at the development, the physical development of players over the course of a season and how that affects their positioning in draft rankings. And Cole McKinney is a prime example of that.
He is.
So excited to talk about him right now a little bit more. He is a center, 6 feet, so a little bit bigger than our friend Ben from the first segment. He's been with the National Team Development Program and the USA U18 squad. He was a 1C for the U18 squad this year, and he's going to Michigan. So really strong training background, going to a very, very top school next year. And he is a two-way center that is a penalty kill specialist and has got that super strong net front presence, which is something the Flyers have been lacking. And we've talked about that in our draft prep, that's something they should really think about looking at, because he's going to get his goals on deflections and dirty plays, right?
Yeah, and he's got good speed. He definitely will get goals that way. He's up to 200 pounds now, and he's solid. He's really more solid than he was when I saw him in January. So like that part's good. I still would take, again, this is a guy I still would take at the bottom of the first round, but he's like if you want to call it middle six, I think he's probably a third line center. Maybe he's a second. He's kind of like that Noah Cates guy where you could probably slot him in either spot, but he'd probably be a better third. But very smart, knows what to do out there, has all those good intangibles. He really is a great penalty killer. Like that's something that you see right away, but he's very much a great locker room guy, good leader. And yeah, he excelled at the U18s.
Yeah, absolutely. So you look at his U18 performance in 7 games played, he had 3 goals and 2 assists, 5 points there, which is really, really good. In the
Besides the other stuff, that's what I mean by excelling. It's not like it's not all about points with him.
Right. But still, for a two-way center, those numbers are very, very good. And for the National Team Development Program overall, he had 61 points in 60 games. Again, really, really strong scoring rate for a two-way center. I think that's important.
He does a lot of things. That's what he's good at. He's not like a guy like Kindel where you say, oh, wow, the skill level's high. That's not this guy. But he does a lot of things well.
Right. And so his high rank right now is 20. His low is 56. So that's like a huge
It is a
gamut
huge.
there.
I think if they see him at the combine and
Mhm.
talk to him, and teams have talked to him, I don't think he could end up at 56. I don't.
No, so his median is at 34. Russ, you had him at 32.
Yep.
And so that's Oilers pick territory
Yeah.
here, or the first of the or first
Yeah.
or
Right in
second of
that
the
in that
second round
range.
picks that the Flyers have. For the national team development program, I mentioned that scoring rate. He did average over a point per game, and he was the top scorer on that U18 squad
Yeah.
for the year. So, I think he has had a really interesting trajectory this year. And I'm wondering, you mentioned he's like a middle sixer
Yeah.
here. Is he a high floor guy as well? Like
Yeah.
you
He's
would
a high
never
floor
see him
guy.
as a fourth liner, right?
Yeah, he definitely could play fourth line if you want him to, and so it's like he could do any of those things. He could do a lot of things.
Hmm.
So he is a guy that at some point will embrace a role and play it to a T. And that's why I don't think he could last till 56. Could he be like, in the fifth or sixth or seventh pick of the second round? Absolutely, depending on how the draft goes. If all of a sudden a lot of defensemen go, yeah, it definitely could happen that way, but he's going to make some team very happy because he's going to elevate that team's percentage chance of getting drafted players if you get him in the second round, because I think he's going to make it.
Yeah, I think so too. Like there's just so much to like about his game, given how well-rounded it is. In terms of things that he does need to work on, I saw a bunch of notes about his puck handling. It is a little weaker.
Yeah,
That's
I think that's
something,
true.
but that he's so good away from the puck,
He
and
is.
he is really good on the forecheck and
Yep,
plays with a ton of pressure in there. And I would say, like in the old kind of Lavi days, he's got a lot of jam
he
to his
does.
game. For sure. But he doesn't have a great shot, but he knows how to dish it to the right person at the right
Right.
time to
It's
take
not
that
about
shot,
him
right?
scoring on the shot or even on the power play. He's an
Mhm.
even strength guy. He can play the power play. Don't get me wrong. He's a really good puck distributor and
Mhm.
can get net front. But 5-on-5, he's a guy that could get you some points when you need them. Like when you're not expecting it, all of a sudden you get points from him.
Right, and that's where the net front presence that I was talking about comes into play, in my opinion, because, like I said, he's got a really solid amount of goals
He
for
does.
his style of play, and that's because he does have that net front presence and can get those deflections
Yep.
or
He's not
rebound
afraid to
goals.
go there. He's got the
Eh,
strength now to hang there. Yep.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that knowing that that's his specialty, that's something he's gonna continue to work on in terms of his body
Yeah.
positioning and the fact that he's grown into his
He's a
body.
really
Like,
good
he'll
skater too. He's an excellent skater.
Yeah, I just really love this kid's game, and I
Yeah.
think, again, for me, it's really depending on what the distribution of picks the Flyers have, what
Right.
they use, and what they choose to use it on, because I do think that the Flyers need a variety of types
They
of
do.
guys to reload the prospect pool. And, we're talking about 3 forwards today. They absolutely need defensemen,
Yeah.
but like this guy, I'm almost so tempted to like load up on forwards and, let
Yeah. I
the
mean, there's
defense
plenty
side
of
of things
time.
go for a little bit.
There are a lot of defensemen in this draft. It's just that these defensemen, nobody's going to help you quickly. And a lot of
Yeah.
them are going to play 3 years in college. But there are a lot of them. And some will pan out and some won't. But yeah, I think at some point the Flyers do have to diversify with the type of forwards they have. I think that's fair. When you said that, I agree with that.
It's really hard. I think we're gonna, as we get closer and closer to the draft itself, we'll probably narrow down who
Yeah.
we would actually pick versus
Mhm.
just talking about some of these guys. We're gonna do that for sure. But, a guy like him is absolutely going higher on my list just because of the role he can play and
Yeah.
knowing that the Flyers are gonna have some holes in these areas when he would be ready to enter the league for sure. I mean, you talk about a net front presence again. Flyers don't really have that at all right now to speak of,
They
but
really don't.
and so Cole McKinney can fill that. And I think on the penalty kill, we've seen it kind of diminish. Now, with new coaching, will
Right.
that
We'll
change?
see.
Possibly. Possibly. But personnel-wise, like right now, I don't think they have strong personnel on the penalty kill,
No, not
particularly.
enough. Not enough guys that do it well.
Right. And so looking at Cole McKinney, is he, a 2 years at Michigan guy and then think about turning
Yeah, I
pro,
think he's
or is
2
he
at Michigan. I think it's possible he would stay at 3rd if they were gonna win a championship or something like that, but I do think
right?
he's 2. I think because of, the increased bulk that now he's put on that'll give him a chance to battle through things quicker, so I think, yeah, you wanna put him in the AHL, let him kinda get used to that, but he's done
Right.
well at every level, and even if he has started off a little slow, which I didn't think he did. I liked him at the Fall Classic right out of the gate. I had him ranked a little higher during the year, but then there were other players that I started to feel like, all right, it just pushed him down a little. I just felt like they emerged, and he emerged too. A lot of them did, and it's just one of those things. It's just the numbers game.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm adding an extra little star next to this
Yeah.
kid's name because just because of the role he can play
Mhm.
and what the Flyers need as we get closer to the draft. Just a reminder that we have a spreadsheet of everybody that we've covered thus far and will continue to cover leading up to the
Rachel
NHL
spreadsheet. Russ
draft.
doesn't do spreadsheets.
It is my work of art that I love doing every single year, but it's got a link to the segments of every single one of the prospects that we've covered. We are rapidly approaching 50 of them so far, and we will continue to add to that list. The link to that is in the show notes and pinned to our social media profiles. The next name we're going to add to that list is Matthew Gard. We're going to talk about him coming up next. There is nothing like playoff hockey, the energy, the rivalries, the nonstop action, and with the Stanley Cup final underway, there has never been a better time to see it live. And if you can make it, Gametime makes getting into that building fast and affordable. Gametime gives you last-minute ticket deals, zone deals for deep discounts, panoramic seat views, and all-in pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ticket prices often drop the closer you get to puck drop, so you can score big without overpaying. Gametime goes the extra mile with their ticket coverage guarantee, covering cancellations, job loss, and even offering 24-hour returns. And if you like planning ahead, the NFL schedule release happened recently. And if you're looking at your fall calendar and picking which Eagles games to go to, Gametime will have you covered. Gametime makes scoring those NFL tickets just as easy. You'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, Russ, Matthew Gard. Now, this was a name that I had not been familiar with, honestly,
Yeah.
prior to the combine. Just hadn't really been on my radar, but he is a 6'4" forward, but he's a little lanky, I would say, 192 pounds. He just turned 18 in April, and he's been with the Red Deer Rebels in the WHL. And I think because Red Deer hasn't been as good a team, that's probably why Matthew hadn't been on my radar, so to speak. But he has played 2C in Red Deer, and he is also like a defensive center. He's
Right.
not an offensive guy. So that's another reason why he may have slipped through the cracks here. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have him on my radar, but the Elite Prospects guys did. So I, eventually did my due diligence on him. But it
Hmm.
took a while. I kind of knew he wasn't going to be in my first round list, so I put it off. And yeah, I'm impressed with him. I spoke to him as well at the combine. He's definitely got that defensive mind. He definitely cheats on faceoffs and likes doing it and says you have to if you want to win them. And so he has no problem doing what it takes to win a faceoff. He is really good with his defensive play, his defensive awareness. He will hit guys. He is not the greatest offensive player, as you said,
Right.
but he kind of reminds me of like a Michael Handzus. Like the Flyers haven't had that
Hmm.
kind of player in a while. He's got
Right.
similar height. He's about an inch shorter, but he sort of plays that style of game, like, and you sometimes need those guys. You need that big face-off guy. You need that guy who could forecheck and kind of, just play an energy shift that really means something. And I think that's what he'll do. And he knows what he is. That's the thing that I like about him the most.
Yeah, so he's definitely a 4C, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the read that I got on him. To your point, really strong on the forecheck. He can play a high tempo game,
Yep.
creates a lot of space, but he's not going to like blow you away with any moves, right?
Nope, but he's valuable.
Yeah, there's definitely a role for that. And I think having a 4C on your team that knows who he is, to your point, and can fulfill that role at an extremely high level
Yeah.
is something that's important to have. And so, you look at his ranking again, because of his role being a defensive center, he's never going to be higher up on the list. But all that considered, his high is 44, the low is 66. So that's, very bottom of the second round, early third round. Median is 55. He's 37th in central scouting for North American skaters, which was up 5 from midseason. So to go up 5 slots on that list is
good.
No slouch, right?
No. He definitely showed some things. And so that's a guy you're looking at maybe with that last second round pick. You're like, hey,
yeah,
if he's still on the board, knowing that there's not what they have they don't have a third, do they? I forget if they have a third or if it's late. Either way, I think you have to grab him with the last second round pick if you want to really get him.
right. So, I think when you look at, again, the distribution of picks, and they actually don't have a fourth rounder this year.
Fourth rounder, that's it.
They do have a third rounder,
right?
But
he won't be there in the fourth, that's for sure.
No. And I think this is a situation where you look at your distribution of picks, look at what they have. And this is where I'm like, well, all things being equal, if they haven't really picked a defenseman yet, and there's a really good defenseman that you like on the board, take the defenseman, right?
Yeah.
I think that's probably the way to go. But that being said, if you feel like what Matthew can bring to the table is so much more than the defensemen that are on the board and in your range right now, that's when I think you think about it. Because again, his role is just so specific and so necessary to have on an NHL team.
Yeah.
And to have a guy that is going to work at that specific role, I think there's something to be said for that, because there's a lot of guys in his position that would try to overshoot who they are.
Right.
And he's not that guy.
No, I asked him about defensive zone faceoffs, and they have faith in him on those important ones.
And that's huge.
Yeah. So I can't think of a Flyer right now that's in their system that would be this guy that could do it like this. They have other guys who can play 4C, but not this role. And if you do plan on being like a really good, diversified, good team down the line, you will need this type of guy.
Right. And that's what the opportunity the Flyers have in this draft is to really diversify and have options, or at least the potential for options for all these different kind of roles that you need in order to build a successful team. And that's, I think, something the Flyers have been lacking overall, is somebody that can fulfill all of the roles that a team needs in order to make a strong Stanley Cup run. And those depth players are extremely important. And having a guy who can take a defensive zone face-off is very important. Having a guy who's going to bring energy like this and help you get into the offensive zone. And then maybe you put a stronger lineup out there on the next whistle and you're good to go, right? So I think that when you're looking for fourth liners, the game has changed to the point where it's not, bruisers, it's smart, effective.
Yeah. Sometimes you want a scoring type out there who could win some faceoffs, and sometimes you want this kind of player.
Yeah. So I do think there's a lot of appeal to him. And I think it just takes the right situation at the right point in the draft relative to your draft board. And it seems obvious to say that because you always are like, oh, take best player available. But I do think in this case with the Flyers, we're looking at the mix as well of what kind of prospects we're adding to the pool overall.
Yeah, and like someone like Sean Couturier is going to age out by the time he's ready. And so, like, who is that guy they're going to rely on for faceoffs? It's not always your 1C. It really isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think that he's an important guy to consider. I'm very glad they talked to him. And it'll be curious to see of these guys that they talk to, like Matthew, who they end up picking, if any of them, right?
Yeah. I think it's important. And it's just good that they're at least, looking into it. They're doing due diligence. That's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that especially with those 4 second round picks, we don't know and they don't know if they're going to end up using them or not.
Right.
Or there'll be deals or whatever. So they have to be prepared to use all of them. And there's a lot of players to evaluate in that range of late first round to mid second round that could be available to them. And so I think it's really important for them to be doing this due diligence like they have done with Ben Kindel, with Cole McKinney, and with Matthew Gard. We are going to continue to talk about the guys that they talked to later this week. We're going to do a whole goalie episode later this week. Excited to get to those prospects because I know that is a big hot topic amongst the Flyers fandom as well. It should be because they absolutely need a goalie. Like I said, on tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about like the physical transformation and how you can project into the NHL for these guys. We're going to look at scouting overall. Plus, we're going to answer your mailbag questions. So make sure you get yours in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can message us on any of our socials, or you can comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen. Today, for your next listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. It's every game, every night until the Stanley Cup is awarded. Get local analysis on a national scale with NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.